Thank you for joining the EBS Summit. Welcome to the third webinar in our EBS Summit series, which will last for the next few weeks. If you haven't been here for the prior two webinars, we have both the recordings and the PowerPoints on our EBS Summit landing page. So if you have the time, feel free to go back. Our first webinar was kicked off by Cliff Godwin from Oracle, talking about the future state of EBS and the roadmap. And the second webinar was followed by SmartDog's president, Scott Eloquin, as he walked through the applications of the series and what to expect going forward. And in terms of today, I wanted to introduce two amazing men from our team, Mihir Patel, who is our CTO, and Al Veach, who's our VP of Sales, as they walk through the hidden benefits of cloud infrastructure of EBS for EBS customers. And this is going to be a slightly technical webinar, but with a focus on customers and ways that you can take advantage of cloud infrastructure today as an EBS customer. That said, as the webinar continues, feel free to submit your questions into the box from GoToWebinar, and at the end we will take those questions and answer them fittingly. So that said, feel free to partake in our EBS Summit schedule to find out more in terms of what we've covered so far and also what to expect in terms of the series. And without any more ado, I'd like to introduce Mihir Patel to overview our agenda and to discuss what we are going to cover today.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about the various different advantages of running Oracle eBusiness Suite in a cloud-based infrastructure or platform as a service model, right? What are the advantages from a cost perspective, technical perspective, business, et cetera? Why would customers want to do that? And then we're going to be discussing various different case studies at the end as well, which Al will detail out for us for the customers that have chosen to migrate their EBS workloads to infrastructure as a service. Why did they do so, and what were the benefits they gained as a result of it? So let's talk about the cost advantages, right? So there's numerous reasons why customers are moving to and evaluating public cloud infrastructure and platform as a service as a means of managing their Oracle ERP environments. Every time I'm talking to the various different customers of ours, C-level executives, et cetera, they basically tell us that, hey, we don't want to be in the data center operation management business, right? We want to be in whatever industry focus area that they're on, right? They're fundamentally changing when they're doing that. What they're doing is fundamentally changing the way they're paying for and consuming IT services, right? It's no longer a CapEx model. It's more of an operating expense model for those businesses that are more focused on managing OpEx versus CapEx or vice versa. So, why are they evaluating cloud, right? They want to basically reduce spending on technology infrastructure, right? They're looking to, reduce capital costs, manage their costs more effectively, and, get agility, or not only from a cost perspective, but also from the benefits of running their workloads on a cloud infrastructure. They're like, hey, we buy a lot of this, my data center and operations folks come to us, and then, they want hardware refreshes every 4 or 5 years. It's a massive undertaking. We have to rip out the old infrastructure. We buy the new. A lot of times it's not even fully utilized. We have a lot of sunk costs, a lot of manpower, et cetera, et cetera. And specifically around Oracle eBusiness Suite, right? With the upgrades in the application side, as well as having to refresh the underlying infrastructure to support the applications as and when they grow, right? So they want to reduce spending on technology, right? So there's pricing available with Oracle's cloud infrastructure and platform as a service on both as a pay-as-you-go model and universal cloud credits model. This is really unique in the sense that, right, we can essentially try stuff out, make sure it works, and then just pay for what we're using. If we buy a physical server asset, we have to buy it, make sure it's sized right, appropriately, procure the storage, et cetera, and all that cost is sunk up front. With the cloud, we can essentially just provision what we need, use it, consume it for the time that we need it, and then retire it. And that way it optimizes our ability to deploy compute infrastructure as and when needed, right? Cloud eliminates the need for replacing, infrastructure on a continual basis, and the capital expenditure associated with it, and the associated potentially licensing costs, software costs, uptakes, et cetera, that have to go that are associated with that, essentially, right? Like if we have customers who are running on a single processor, 4-core boxes. Very difficult to find one of those in the market these days, right? If we do, we end up paying more than what we would if I got a hexa-core, an octa-core chip, and whatnot. So there's economies of scale in regards to running your Oracle workloads in cloud infrastructure and not having to just necessarily uptake licensing costs because infrastructure isn't available to accommodate whatever we're currently owning, right? So we talked about the effectiveness of paying for only what we're consuming in the cloud. That goes only also for not only just the infrastructure components and the server storage, et cetera, but also for the associated licensing costs that go along with that. The key one is the agility that it gives us, right? We're able to dynamically allocate and deallocate compute and storage resources as and when needed. If a project needs a certain infrastructure capacity just to get launched, after that project's done, we can retire those things and only pay for it for that 3-6 month time period in which we needed that. And it's like for like, so there's no deltas in terms of, hey, we tested it on this versus not. And we'll get into some of that a little bit later in the deck. So what are the technical advantages? There's numerous technical advantages, right, in terms of running your Oracle workloads in the cloud versus a traditional hosted or on-premise data center having your own infrastructure model. Yeah, you can minimize the maintenance costs. You get latest, greatest innovative technology in terms of hardware, NVMe drives, et cetera. The new generations of servers that are coming out, they're available on the cloud. You get device diversity, leveraging PaaS. We can enable mobile and other capabilities with literally a click of a button. Ease of implementation, right, and customization as well. So basically we can minimize maintenance and avoid the hassle of hardware refreshes and licensing and stuff like that we talked about initially, right? We basically these are essentially virtual machines in the cloud, if you will, in the public cloud infrastructure, and we dynamically allocate and deallocate those compute resources as and when needed. Innovations in technology, right? We don't need to manage or own those physical assets, servers, resources, et cetera. And, we basically leverage a cloud whatever the cloud providers are presenting to us, and typically they're next generation, current generation infrastructure that's being able to provision versus having to buy it and then age it out over the next 4 to 5 years. Every year we essentially get access to whatever the latest and greatest, whether it be CPUs or GPUs or storage technology, IO, et cetera. All those things that get continually refreshed, right? So that's what we are able to do as a result of moving workloads to the cloud. And it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. We don't have to run everything in the cloud. Even if we run just dev test in the cloud or just some workloads in the cloud, we still get those benefits, right? Device diversity, right? We can run a bunch. If we enable platform as a service, we can enable mobile and integration and all these other capabilities without really having to implement and invest in additional infrastructure and or software assets. We basically can go and try those things out. And at cloud.oracle.com, they actually have free trial credits that customers can sign up for and try those capabilities out. Ease of implementation is literally a click of a button, right? If you look at your typical hardware procurement cycle, right, when we're looking at refreshing infrastructure, we have to go through various different vendors, get quotes, et cetera. The boxes arrive. We have to make sure that there's thermal stabilization happens, such that, if we take it off the hot truck and put it right into a cold data center that doesn't condense, all those things, we don't have to worry about any of that, right? Wiring, cabling, data center power, heating, cooling, none of those factors we have to worry about. We can literally go to a business meeting today, and right after the business meeting, we can make a decision that this is what we need to deploy, go to the cloud console, click of a button, those virtual machines, or that even a physical bare metal machine is fully available, allocated to us to go and execute or whatever our business goals and initiatives are the next day. and we only pay for it, again, just the time that we're using it. So that's the innovation. That's the capabilities that cloud allows us to bring to the business, right? Cutting edge technology, right? Less glitches on hardware hiccups, right? Increased storage capacities, right? Realistic test environments. We'll talk about those, right? So cutting edge technology, right? Offers customers more newer technologies, right? As we already discussed somewhat, in the sense that as soon as new technologies are available, we are able to leverage them in terms of storage replication, copying, right? Block volume, object storage, etc. New capabilities are being introduced weekly, monthly, quarterly by Oracle. And these are industry leading. They're not, legacy types of services that, wait a second, you're using last generation infrastructure, servers, storage, etc. This is leading, cutting edge from that perspective. Even the way Oracle's architected the cloud from a flat network perspective, the multiple availability domains, etc., is very, very unique and different. And we'll get into some of these differentiating elements in future webinars, as Audrey had mentioned. There's less glitches and hardware hiccups, right? Cloud providers typically manage the upgrades of the hardware and manage the obsolescence of the infrastructure, and managed service providers like SmartDog and whatnot. We can help manage the applications and moving them off of the old and moving them into new infrastructure, right? So it doesn't necessarily require full-fledged applications upgrades and things like that. We can simply migrate or move the virtual machines in some cases. Some cases we might have to upgrade, but it's controlled, right? So it's a more elastic model and allowing us to adapt. Increased storage, right? So organizations can store more data than on private computer systems. We get access to infinite amount of storage. Not only do you get access to a lot of storage density, but you also get better I/O throughput capabilities on cloud storage infrastructures. And you can simply attach and detach those storage volumes as and when needed. Not only that, you get the ability to copy block volumes and whatnot. You get different capabilities and features that if you bought that infrastructure on premise, whether it be Hitachi's Shadow image for storage-based replication, EMC, block volume copies, things like that. Those extra features across the various different storage providers, if we wanted those same capabilities, we're going to have to pay for extra software, extra capabilities on the storage arrays on the cloud. You get that, and it's literally like pennies on the dollar. All that compute, all that I/O, all of that replication capability, et cetera, is already built into the platforms, and we just have to leverage it, and it doesn't cost us anymore. We're simply paying for storage. Yeah, I think over the 8 years in my lifetime, I've always heard storage is cheap. I think I actually believe that today with cloud, that storage is actually cheap, and that I'm not having to give up any of the really cool bells and whistles that I would get if I had my massive Emacs or some of these other massive storage arrays at my disposal if I bought it on premise. Realistic test environments, right? So unlike most cloud providers, Oracle's setup enables you to create test environments that closely resemble your on-premise hosted ones, right? So this is a key differentiator. So we have customers that are running Exadata on-prem, right? You can run Exadata on Oracle's cloud, x86 to x86 workloads, and it's like for like. OS versions, etc. It's the same x86 platform, kernels, etc. So it allows us to take development and test environments for those projects as and when needed, spin them up, deploy those onto the cloud, and retire them as soon as the project's over, right? So some customers decide to end up keeping dev test in the cloud. So and then using that as their migration flow, dev test in the cloud, QA's on-premise, and then production is on-premise. So they get the full life cycle, and then not over time they're aging out and retiring their legacy infrastructure and slowly but surely moving into the cloud. And it's a good way to cut your teeth on saying, hey, how does this work for us? How does the management of these cloud assets from an infrastructure perspective work for us? So ease of management and technology flexibility. So ease of management, right? So in terms of setting up your virtual networks, your storage, your compute, et cetera, it's literally clicks of a button on a console, and it will literally within like 30 minutes to an hour, you can set up an entire virtual data center that's at your disposal to run enterprise workloads on Oracle's cloud infrastructure, right? The ability to spin up and spin down infrastructure is literally the clicks of a button away. No longer do I have to say, hey, well, that's a storage engineer shop. Oh, that's we can certainly devise a security to split those functions up in the console, but we have a smaller IT staff and a budget and smaller teams. We can streamline some of those operations and manage those through a single pane of glass and support our entire business through the Oracle Cloud Console. So technology flexibility, right? So Oracle offers various flavors of infrastructure as a service. If some customers that we have, they have full server requirements. No, we don't want noisy neighbors. We don't want this. We want physical servers that are dedicated to us that we know that we can manage the compute and whatnot, and we'll decide how we want to manage and deploy the hypervisor and carving that infrastructure and servers up. We get that capability. We can have the latest and greatest hardware infrastructure at our disposal, 50 to 36 core machines that we can then put our own hypervisor on it, whatever we want, Hyper-V, Oracle VM, what have you, and carve that up and run whatever workloads we want on that platform and manage it as if that server was within our own data center. As well as extending that and just having various different smaller compute infrastructures available, virtual machines, etc. So again, giving us the ability to only provision and deploy and stand up assets that are needed for that particular workload, not having to buy a massive workload infrastructure and then having it sit idle. So we can dynamically provision. If we provision something and we find that it's not being consumed, we can actually retire it and not have to pay for it. So it gives us tremendous flexibility in terms of how we are managing our cloud infrastructure or virtual cloud data center, if you will. So what are the business advantages of running workloads on cloud or infrastructure service and platform as a service, right? So from a customization perspective, right, we can build our virtual cloud data center and tailor the infrastructure to business needs and growth goals, right? No longer do we have to buy pre-buy, if you will, infrastructure and get it stood up in the hopes that, hey, the business will grow into it. We only buy what we need at the time, and we can architect it in a way that it allows us to dynamically scale up the compute needs as and when business needs it in a matter of minutes. That capacity is already available in the cloud. We just have to decide that we want to tap into it and capture it. So flexibility, pay only for what is needed, right? Stay ahead of the business demand and optimize speed to market, right? This is an interesting one. We've had customers that, hey, we need to buy in country. We want to buy servers and infrastructure in South America. Each country has different export compliance laws, hardware infrastructure deployment laws. The cloud, we don't have to think about those business challenges because it's all virtual. We can log in to the console, provision a virtual machine, extend our network into South America, and our South America business operations can easily access that infrastructure in the cloud and start working on that compute infrastructure within days. So for those of you that are in a global business and had to deal with buying in various different geographies and whatnot, you guys can probably relate, right? So agility, right? Oracle cloud infrastructure enables our business to move faster, right? Produce more, pivot more easily, right? And meet increased demand proactively, regardless of where we are globally. Innovation, right? Develop faster at a quicker pace, right? So development teams, business is no longer waiting on IT to procure, deploy, provision, infrastructure, servers, storage, wires, networks, switches, routers, all that stuff, buying those kits, etc. Right? In my previous job, I used to work at a pretty large hardware infrastructure provider in the industry, and anytime we needed infrastructure, it would literally take 3 to 4 months before we could get a server to start transacting and getting the business the value that they needed, and that costs money to the business, right? There are initiatives that they were trying to drive that we weren't able to adapt. We had to worry about heating, cooling, power, voltage, this, that, and the other, wiring, cables, numerous different business challenges that with the cloud we don't even have to think about anymore. Innovation, right? So that's around allowing the business to innovate and our teams to innovate and deploy things faster. So choice, quality of service, right? So options between multiple cloud vendors based on the quality of service, right? So a lot of times, we have customers that aren't. None of our customers, in fact, are a single cloud, right? It's a hybrid cloud environment. What we're finding is that other cloud providers, AWS, Azure, et cetera, are already in play. So why are customers moving Oracle workloads to Oracle's cloud infrastructure? Mainly because what they're finding, there's numerous advantages, not only from the actual cost of that service. There's license advantages. But the key one is that they're actually able to get latest generation compute I/O throughput, the speed of which they're able to transact on the Oracle platform, and what they're paying for is nowhere near the other cloud providers. So it's really designed for running Oracle's workload and really designed for running enterprise workloads, not necessarily just Oracle. We have customers that are running Microsoft workloads, but they're enterprise workloads on Oracle's cloud infrastructure. So its choice and quality of service is key as well when we're talking about public cloud infrastructure. So, right, monitoring, stay within budget and ahead of completion cycle times, right? A lot of times the projects get delayed because, it took 10 hours longer, 30 hours longer for those patch cycles to run because we don't have enough CPU cycles in dev test. How long will it take to run that patch in production? Don't know. We know production's faster, right? Those types of things we can actually predict timings and things like that better, and monitor that consumption and whatnot in the cloud, and stay ahead of our budget and project completion timelines. Staying ahead of the curve is the fastest, most cost-effective business enabling technology. I think that that's available today. So cloud in general, whether it's IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, allows us as a business to stay ahead of the curve and adapt to changing business needs, requirements, economies, et cetera. Right? If we look at a business like Netflix or Uber or one of those, right? If they would have tried to deploy that business model on traditional hardware infrastructure, those companies would not have been able to grow at the scale and velocity with which they did. There's no way they could have deployed the amount of computing resources that are needed to run a streaming service or cloud routing service, car routing service such as that. Without this type of platform architecture, cloud architecture being available, right? Quality of service, all parts of the Oracle technology stack, from infrastructure up to the applications, come from the same vendor and are engineered to work together, right? So a lot of Oracle customers are wanting to run their Oracle workloads on Oracle's cloud because it's all engineered to work together. When Oracle tests this stuff, it's certified on their cloud. It's not necessarily certified on other cloud vendors and providers. So, growth and performance advantages. We discussed some of these things, right? Economies of scale, right? So we can increase the volume and productivity with fewer people and resources as and when needed, right? The speed and agility with which we can provision server, storage, network, et cetera, is within clicks of a button, not months. It's literally minutes. Time saver, right? So the IT folks that are traditionally responsible for doing that, it frees up their time to go focus on optimizing that infrastructure and optimizing it versus just focusing on sustaining legacy infrastructure and moving it and things like that. They're literally it elevates their value in terms of strategic value to the business, because they're actually focused on strategic initiatives and not just keeping the lights on in terms of running IT and running the business, right? And hybrid is the new normal, as we discussed, right? It's not a one cloud vendor or one solution fits all, right? There are certain workloads that may make sense to keep on traditional data centers or hosting providers, and only move certain workloads into the cloud. And with cloud in general, public cloud providers, that possibility exists essentially. So migration advantages, right? So with Oracle's cloud, specifically Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, right? There's migrations tool sets, not just for Oracle E-Business Suite, but other databases and stuff you may have in your enterprise as well, right? There's an EBS Cloud Admin tool. This tool streamlines the ability to migrate your ERP workloads into Oracle's cloud, and you can do it from your backups and whatnot as well. And it's essentially streamlines your ability to adopt Oracle Cloud Infrastructure in your environment. And it's something that, again, you guys can try it out on cloud.oracle.com, and it's like, I think there's a $300 credit available from Oracle today. And SQL Developer can be used to migrate, and support other database and objects migration from other database providers as well. Staff advantages, right? So we spoke about some of this. So IT can focus on innovation. That's the key that I think is what that cloud allows IT organizations to allow their resources to, is to innovate and develop solutions quicker, better, faster, right? Potentially less personnel training, right? Because we have folks focusing on business initiatives and not necessarily having to learn the next generation of XYZ server vendors, infrastructure or storage arrays, things like that, right? Enabling mobility of the resources, right? Potentially less IT staff focused on keeping the lights on versus focusing on strategic initiatives, right? And then you can have skilled practitioners, focusing on key areas versus having to have different folks focus on different things. So on that note, I'm going to pass it to Al, and he's going to walk us through different customer examples and what advantages customers have had by moving to Oracle's cloud.
Thank you, Mihir. Yeah, what we thought would be very helpful for everyone would be able to show practical use cases so you could kind of put yourself in the situation of some of the customers. So we've taken a handful of use cases here from some of our projects that we've done so far, and would like to share them with you. This first one is a solar panel manufacturer that, we're not starting with a large major migration. This is really just the opposite. This is an organization that needed to downsize. They were a victim of a judicial ruling that impacted their business fairly significantly, and they were in the middle of a lawsuit as a result. And so they needed to scale back their full dev test production environment to a read-only reporting environment for E-Business Suite. So they started on Oracle's classic OCIC cloud, Oracle's classic infrastructure, and they also were managed by Oracle's managed cloud services, which is fairly reactive in terms of support. So they felt like the best thing for them to do is to try to go to a downsized model, and they weren't sure how to get there. So SmartDog designed a way for them, first of all, to get to the more current infrastructure that Oracle offers now, which is OCI, and do so and move them to a small cloud infrastructure, cloud shape, for them to house their EBS read-only environment. And they were able, in doing that, we were able to also set them up with basically a small pay-by-the-drink support model so that they could keep their costs down, keep the lights on, and focus on addressing the business challenges that they had in terms of the judicial ruling. Fortunately, they've come out of that looking really well. They have now gotten a more favorable ruling that's just taken place for their business, and they are about to move forward with a full dev test prod production environment in OCI, and we're going to migrate them into that here in the upcoming weeks. And in doing so, they will have proactive support. They'll have full managed cloud service, proactive support from SmartDog, and also full eBusiness Suite support. So in doing so, they move from the classic cloud infrastructure of Oracle's to the more current, faster Tier 1 infrastructure they have today. They were able to leverage the pay by the drink when they didn't have the money, and then move to a full-blown managed service when they were ready to move forward. And like I said, get the proactive managed support that they needed to address a dynamic environment versus a read-only environment as they migrated. So that flexibility of turning on a dime from small to big, from reactive to proactive, is what the cloud and SmartDog coupled together is really all about. So in our second example here, this particular customer was is a manufacturer of fabrics, and they were supported by a hosting company offshore and having a lot of challenges because there again, as is with a typical hosting support structure, they don't typically move forward with making changes to your environment unless requested. So a lot of patches needed to be applied. They requested to do some upgrades to the database after 2 failures in that regard, and also a failure to try to upgrade the eBusiness Suite itself. They found themselves with a very high-risk environment running their business, and were very concerned because they did not have their own internal IT support staff and dealing with outdated OS and database versions on top of that. So not getting the best functionality out of EBS and not having a stable environment put a huge risk on their business. So they engaged SmartDog, and what we did is we moved forward with a migration to, there again, Oracle's cloud infrastructure. And in doing so, we combined that migration with an upgrade. So essentially, if you're looking at a hardware migration, a platform migration, or a major upgrade like this particular customer needed to do, you can absorb the cost of that cloud migration in that initiative and save your money in doing so. There's a lot of redundant tasks there, so it's easy to do, and those are the times you want to try to do that. So we were also able to eliminate the cost move to a Tier 1 package and a state-of-the-art architecture that was also on the most current database and current EBS release. In doing all of those changes in terms of an upgrade, they actually resulted in paying less on a per-month basis. So they ultimately lowered their monthly burn and increased their functionality. And then we wrapped it up by making sure all of their end users were trained on the latest and greatest as it pertains to 12.2. So this is a huge success. One other caveat that is definitely worth mentioning in this particular engagement is that we found through the process, because we always do a license analysis with our customers to make sure that we don't create a licensing event when moving them to a new infrastructure. And what we found is through however the infrastructure was set up initially, they had put themselves in a significant license compliance issue, actually through their third-party support mechanism, not through any fault of their own. And what SmartDog was able to do in the migration is leverage the cloud infrastructure to more efficiently consume the database licenses and literally cut the database license consumption in half and almost mitigate entirely the cost of the compliance issue that the customer had. So they were faster, they were better, they had more features, and they were spending less on database and on support and infrastructure all in one fell swoop. So huge success here. Looking at example number 3, this particular customer is a world leader in fertilizer and plant performance products. They have about 500 employees in multiple countries all over the world. They had been a customer of SmartDog for several years, but there again, sitting on a hosted environment, had a security gaffe exposed while we were in the process of supporting them as a result of how things were set up from the infrastructure side. And this particular customer asked us to examine their environment and also take a look at their licensing. What we found that was disturbing for the customer is that they did not realize, because there had been a lot of transition in management since when they purchased EBS, is that they did not own a full use Oracle database license. So they were running eBusiness Suite sitting on a runtime edition of the database. Now that's perfectly legal as long as you're not actually using custom objects at the database level. And of course, it kind of defeats the purpose of leveraging a tier 1 package like Oracle and not taking advantage of some of those personalizations and that you're able to do so with Oracle. So the customer had a choice of ripping out a lot of advantages they had built into the implementation to become compliant, or spending several $100,000 to become compliant. And what SmartDog did was design a database cloud service solution where they went with an automated tooling database in the cloud, and instead of paying a large lump sum, spread that cost out through a subscription service and increase the functionality of the database by getting access to automated patching that you get through database in the cloud. So we were able there again to increase their functionality and allow them to spread the cost of that database compliance issue out over a much longer period of time, and in moving to a tier 1 secure environment, address those security loopholes that the customer was experiencing. And that doesn't even touch on the dramatic improvement in speeds that the brand new infrastructure brought to the table. So in example 4 here, this particular customer is a partner. They specialize in delivering enterprise asset management solutions, and they deliver their solutions in an environment where they make sure that the customer is trained on how to maintain their large assets within their organization through a train-the-trainer type of approach. So not only did they use EBS and integrated with enterprise asset management in a demo environment, they actually used it as part of their delivery mechanism for their projects for training. In doing so, they did not want to be in the data center business, and they were looking for SmartDog to provide them a solution. And so SmartDog moved their entire business into the cloud, including setting up an integration to the Vision EBS database. So I should say applications. And so in doing that, they were able to integrate and test and demo and train all of their customers and not have to worry about focusing on the infrastructure or managing the environment at all, at a very low cost solution to them, and eliminating hardware provisioning costs moving forward for this particular partner. It's been a huge success. Now, you could take this same example and apply it to your company if you wanted to spin up environments for the purpose of leveraging training environments for your colleagues within the organization. So if you see a new feature functionality come out as it pertains to EBS, you will have direct access through Oracle Public Cloud to the Oracle's cloud marketplace, and you can literally test on the fly by spinning up an environment, new feature functionality with your own data before you decide to implement that into your production system. So a great example of a way that you could use that in a practical manner and very cheaply. Okay, so example 5 is a North American telecommunications and full-service call center. Data is a big thing to this particular company, with offices both in the U.S. and in Canada, with 1,200 telecom and 200 hospitality healthcare companies that they service. So what this particular company was dealing with is they were leveraging database cloud service, but they were leveraging it on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Classic. We've seen quite a bit of issues here in this particular permutation, so as it pertains to networking challenges. And this particular customer had decided they were going to set up their own cloud infrastructure environment and didn't quite hit the mark in terms of the configuration. So they were experiencing frequent outages and problems they just couldn't deal with that based on the type of business they were in. So SmartDog immediately focused in on how to remediate the existing environment, and our team basically descended on these guys in a matter of about 8 hours, and were able to diagnose the problem the same day that we received access to the environment. We then put together a plan, implemented that plan, and within 30 days had them secured on SmartDog's managed service proactive support to stabilize that environment. But we saw that the long-term solution for this customer was to move them to the new cloud infrastructure, increasing speeds, and leverage the availability domains in OCI. So the plan there was to show the customer and give them comfort that when they made that move, that they would see that improvement. So we actually went ahead and set up a test environment, a sandbox, if you will, for the customer. And in a matter of a couple of weeks, they were able to get a certain level of comfort, and we rolled right into setting up a plan to migrate them over to OCI and also add to that a disaster recovery environment. So very excited about what we've done with the cloud examples we've shown here. There's a lot more opportunities out there for you guys. And the cool thing about it is what you're going to find, and you can see in this example, is that Oracle actually paid for the migration of this particular cloud instance from OCIC over to OCI. Oracle is serious about putting their money where their mouth is through various funding mechanisms, and one of only a few velocity partners that creates that funding mechanism is SmartDog. And so we're here to make sure that we can lighten your load in terms of the cost of getting to the cloud so that you can start to experience some of those benefits.
Thanks, Al. So a lot of times when we're talking to customers, right, they're like, okay, all this stuff sounds great here. How do we get started? What do we do, right? Like, what's it going to cost? Is it really viable for us? Does it make sense for us? We don't know, right? So we've come up with different engagement options for our customers, right? There's option number 1, there's no cost. It's about a 2-week engagement, right? Very minimal time from the customers. We call it our 3x5 compute cloud assessment, right? So it's a rapid assessment. It's a thumbnail, what would this look like? What would it cost to move the Oracle ERP environment and associated Oracle Cloud assets into Oracle's cloud? How much would that? Just tell me. I'm looking at a hardware refresh. Just tell me what it is. That's option 1, right? The next one is like, hey, we have more complex workflows, not just our EBS, but other stuff as well, right? And on that one, it might take longer, right? So this is typically a 4, maybe 5-week engagement, right? It might involve a platform migration, things like that. And this range is anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000. Just kind of depends on how many assets we're talking about moving into the cloud and whatnot. Then there are other customers like, hey, I have an entire data center that we just want to take out. right? And we actually need to come up with a blueprint on what workloads are viable to move to the cloud. I'm not going to assume that everything that I have can actually work in the cloud. So, what do you recommend? Which applications should go first? Should my ERP go first? Should my, XYZ apps go first? And which cloud should they go to? Should it all go to Oracle? Should it go to Oracle, Microsoft, AWS? What makes sense? We don't know. Help us figure that out and help us come up with a blueprint. That can be 6 weeks plus, depending on how many assets, what it is, what we're trying to accomplish from an overall business perspective. But with this one, we'll do a multi-year cloud architecture roadmap blueprint, and we'll help you figure it out. We'll be on the journey with you. And on that note, Audrey?
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time out of your afternoon to join into our series. As I think based on today's panel, it looks like at this time that we do not have any further questions. So you'll receive, just so you know kind of how the series works, if you subscribe to the series as a whole, you'll receive an email later today that will go ahead and register you for our next webinar that will happen on April 13th, so 2 weeks from today. And that webinar will cover licensing specifically, and Mihir will also be giving that webinar. So the title of that is Oracle Tech Licensing, Know Your Entitlements, Danger and Opportunity. So that said, we thank you very much for joining us today. We're really excited to share with you more that we've learned in both the world of EBS and the world of Oracle's cloud infrastructure and how that's applying to our customers. So stay tuned and feel free to join us on both social media and also on the Summit Series to get exclusive content and offers around this opportunity. And in the meantime, have a great Friday, and thank you again, Mihir and Al, for your time. And we will touch base with you in the next 2 weeks. Thank you all.